I've heard nothing but bad things about Frost, whether it be its difficulty or lack of quests or hard to piece together narrative. And to that, I said that sounds like a perfect 20,000 subscribers special. With an emphasis on letting go and turning survival mode into a marathon of pain, what better way to show you guys my appreciation for all your support than to dive headfirst into this hellscape and see just how hard this mod truly is. As always with any Fallout run, I tried to make a beautiful character. Even Nora thought so this time. But instead of a normal opening, I turned around to see that my house was flooded, and a skull was sitting on my bathroom sink. But instead of a goofy decoration, this gave me the option to play as a ghoul. Reading the pros and cons of being a ghoul didn't seem that bad at the time, so I decided to check it out. But for the love of God, my brother in Christ, if you don't know what you're doing and you're going into this game blind, please do not pick this option, because even though you look sick as hell when you do, the sanity loss is a huge detriment this early on. But we'll touch base on that later. So after admiring my sick new look, I attempted to check out the rest of my house, but was instead greeted by some goons who smacked me unconscious. Upon waking up, I got to set my stats, and I decided to go with 10 in strength because I figured there'd be a lot of melee combat, 10 in endurance to be able to take a hit, 3 in agility because I guess, and then since I had a point left over, I put it into perception because YOLO! And then got greeted by a familiar opening. Much like with Dust, you get multiple different paths to start with. However, before starting up this mod, make sure you disable all Creation Club content, or it'll lead you to what I'm assuming is the canon start. But as far as an opening goes, this is dope as hell. Everything is quiet, and you're trapped in a cage with a corpse. You free yourself and now you have to piece together what's going on, but given the details you find, nothing makes any sense. It's almost like waking up and being bombarded right when you open your eyes. Everything is a haze, and you're not sure what's going on. But there's a door beckoning you to go through. There's no music, and now you arrive at a fork in the road. Most of these passages require keys, but with some looking around in the Creation Club guiding me in a sorts, don't worry, I turned it off after this. I decided to check out the subway line to start my journey. I was actually surprised at the fact that I could talk to these people I found, but since I didn't take any points into charisma, I decided not to push any of my luck and backpedaled to search the area. Moving through a broken tram, I found another transition door, but it decided to go fully explore the area, and that meant passing by the friendlies from earlier. Except for some reason now, they hated me, and showed me that even with a 10 in endurance, one shot is all that's needed to take me out. So naturally, I had to do it to him. I ran back only to find that one of the survivors was missing. Shame, really, because that meant the other homie didn't have any backup. So now with the area cleared, I found a diary detailing what I can only assume were the survivors' beginnings. They just wanted a new start in the underground and even had a teddy bear to remember their missing child. Damn, maybe I shouldn't have done that? Ha! Psych! I stole that teddy bear and went off in search of new loot. If they're gonna just bum rush me, then they gotta learn the hard way. I decided to continue down a dark tunnel until I found a dead body on a tram. Not only did the dead body have some super sweet armor, but they also had an explosive detection kit, something that made audible noise if I was near a trap. Continuing on, I found Scully Station. I don't remember this being in Fallout 4, so it's probably a new thing for the mod, but whereas I was happy to see civilization, the people here were not happy to see me. It could have been because of the Molotov I threw at them, but next thing I knew, I was smacking down a conga line of survivors. But I finally got a gun, and a revolver at that. This thing would do so much work, I just knew it. But I never got to use it, as the very next set of survivors taught me that blocking requires positioning. I've never had to use melee combat this much in Fallout 4 before, so I didn't think being slightly turned would end up with my arm being blown off. Okay, despite the setbacks of me needing to get good, At least I had somewhat of a goal, so I did the usual smack, grabbed my clothes, and then had a straight shot to Scully Station. But upon leaving the metro, I was greeted to the familiar sight of Good Neighbor. Okay, so that's what it is. Scully Station is just Good Neighbor's alternate name. That's cool. Except as I took in the site, I got reminded I was playing Frost and got jumped mere seconds after. I did make it back to Good Neighbor again and didn't die in the doorway, so that was awesome. But then I was set on fire while enemies just stared at me. I'm thinking I got shot as well, but death comes so quick I couldn't process what actually happened. On a third attempt, I was doing work. I was smacking everyone, and at one point I cleared out the whole immediate area and now had some room to breathe. Hotel Rexford is one of those places where everyone kind of congregates, so I figured that would be a good place to check out. But walking inside, I got greeted by more hostiles. They were very sluggish to attack, so I thought I could just take them out one at a time. But then this woman behind the counter showed me that flamer she kept in her pocket, and I was dead before I knew it. Now this may look brutal, and trust me, starting off can seem like it, but this is the best way to introduce the player into a world where everything wants you dead, and makes you stop to think about what you're going to do instead of just running in. And what I had learned from this experience was, group fights are a death sentence, and make sure you check your surroundings before using the slowest weapon known to mankind to fight people. You're not Rambo, and these guys can block. You're going to lose if you do this. But while exploring, I did manage to find an underground labyrinth, so maybe I was making progress now? Well, it felt that way until I found ghouls. Yeah, that didn't last very long. On another attempt, I found a survivor camp, but they wanted nothing to do with me and instead initiated Operation Slapnuts. Okay, maybe playing as a ghoul wasn't the best choice. Maybe they're attacking me on sight because I look like a bad guy? So I reloaded as a human and began anew, but this time I did change up my stats. I still went with a 10 in strength to do max damage, but then split the remaining points between endurance, charisma, and intelligence to kind of thin out the build. But even with the change to charisma, my favorite punching bag still wanted that smoke. Shit was always on sight with this man. I'm not sure how much talking I'll be doing in this run, but I'm thinking that charisma may have been the wrong call. Continuing on, I ended up back in the labyrinth and discovered the sewers, finding a Malden man. This dude was tough. Even without him using a weapon, he still took a while to take down. But he did drop a ripper. Finally, something cool, something different. Maybe this guy was a boss or something. But before I could even plan my way of escape, I got charged by 2 more Malden men. And with one attack, I was sent packing all the way back to the beginning. Where the hell am I supposed to be going? At this point, I was certain that making it to the surface was the right call, but if the surface kept putting me in Good Neighbor, I had no idea how I was supposed to live long enough to leave. I tried the sewers again, dead. Found a settlement of survivors that should have been a cakewalk because of pathing issues, dead. Tried again because I hadn't gone this way yet, dead. What do you want from me, Frost? I'm still stuck in the fucking intro. I did eventually clear out these survivors and now had a new place to rest, and this was the first bed I had seen in nearly 2 hours. And after exploring the area, I realized where I was. I was in the metro leading to Vault 114. I did try to make it into the vault, but sadly that was blocked off. And with that being said, unless things had changed, there was a bed and a new exit nearby. And 3 deaths later, I could finally leave into the open Commonwealth. Now remember those tips I gave about 5 minutes ago? I was not following any of those at this point. Don't think that this is unfair, that the odds are stacked against you. The game is only as hard as you make it. If you don't scope out your fights and try to fight every encounter you come across, you're only going to get more frustrated with each death. I mean, I'm only going on hour 3 in the footage that I'm showing you, and already I've had to rethink how I normally play this game. It's not a race, but more of an endurance test to see if you have the smarts to make it through this new Commonwealth. Don't go in expecting a hero simulator. If you treat it like a horror survival where avoiding fights is more practical than engaging with everything, then your experience is going to change greatly, because the same rules that apply to you apply to everyone else. If enemies do have guns, they only have so many bullets, and once they're gone, they're gone. So make sure to plan for some melee combat, because everything you know in this game is gone. The world hasn't quite gotten to that bustling world of Fallout 4 that we all know yet. So entire factions exist and locations still have their old names. The Commonwealth is covered in a layer of snow and radiation is plentiful. Preparation is key to survival, and a tip I'd advise straight from the beginning is avoid the army at any cost. These guys have all the best weapons and they're going to shoot you on sight. There is no talking your way out of this one. Since the army was nice enough to send me back to bed, the next major question arose. Where do I go from here? I went into Frost as blind as possible, but I was aware that the overall story of Frost was given out through computer terminals and notes left on characters. I had come across some already, but nothing of any major significance, nothing that actually pointed me in a direction. With only so many ways forward, I figured that since I had a closer resting point, I'd try Good Neighbor again. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, what can I say? But traveling through the metro wasn't what I had expected. Areas I had previously cleared were now full again. And I don't mean that I died and had to redo it, I mean brand new people had moved in. Except what I actually meant is in my many adventures of dying here, respawning there, traveling here, getting fucking lost in the ether, then ending up back here, I had lost track of who was actually dead and who was alive. Were these newcomers, or were they the same people that I had just missed at a different route? Who knows? Normally I'd say to leave them, but these squatters would rather see me as their new living room rug, so I had to issue out some evictions. Making it to Good Neighbor took no time after that, and I didn't get jumped, so that's nice. But I had grown accustomed to the art of the bum rush, and they were taken down easily. I tried scoping out a warehouse and had someone phase through the door to kill me? Trust me, this won't be the last time this happens. But at the bottom of the warehouse, I was rewarded with a sleeping spot and a Grognak comic. Finally, a foothold in Good Neighbor. While investigating the surrounding area, I found a terminal that gave me some juicy gossip. It mentioned some recruitment for raiders, but also name-dropped Bunker Hill. Turns out that the army remnants were starting to move in on that location. Maybe that's where I was supposed to go? Before leaving, I decided to check out the rest of Good Neighbor and spent the next 15 minutes dying. I still wasn't listening to my tips from earlier and was struggling to get anywhere. Running wasn't even an option for me, but it should have been. I lost a ton of sanity here for no reason, in real life and in game. I gave up on exploring and ran back through the metro to Vault 114 to begin the hike to Bunker Hill, and once outside, I was alone. It's odd to say this out loud, but in Fallout 4 there's factions all over the place, whether it's raiders, ghouls, mirelurks, super mutants. But in Frost, because the bigger mutated creatures don't exist, there's less enemies to bump into. But the even more frightening part is that any of the enemies you do bump into have more than enough potential to kill you. This feeling of being alone was unsettling, and with Frost doing an excellent job of cutting out the background music at times, you actually spend time listening twice as hard or checking every single alleyway. You stick to the shadows or even take the rooftops. This was amazing to witness and an even greater feeling of playing. It truly captures that feeling of struggling to survive, and that even though it's only a 5-minute walk, you're never truly safe until you sleep. Upon making it to Bunker Hill, my first sight was a dead Alliance volunteer, which just means new loot for me, but considering that note from Good Neighbor said that the army had moved in, I'd have to be on my guard. And instead of rushing in, I backpedaled to try and find a bed to sleep at, only to eventually step on a landmine. I swear, throughout the course of this run, it really felt like these landmines were put in the most random of places. On a second attempt, I got jumped by some ghouls. Then I defused a mine only to get eaten by a dog. And then another dog attack. At this point, I needed some way to defend myself, so instead of heading straight to Bunker Hill, I traveled back to Good Neighbor via the surface. because outside Good Neighbor were some bodies, and the loot they had was awesome. Tons of guns and ammo. That is, until the ghouls showed up and pretty much emptied out everything I had, only to survive and then get eaten by dogs. Then I stepped on some more landmines, and then did it again, and my next attempt finally landed me a weapon, and I immediately ran back to the metro to sleep. Talk about one hell of a side quest. I was only moving up the street and got ripped to shreds. But with my new gear, now came the hike for Bunker Hill. Nothing too crazy happened other than stopping off at the Kabat house, only to find out that I couldn't come in, but then I arrived at Bunker Hill and even got a new place to sleep. Surprisingly, there wasn't anyone here though. At least not that I could see. Because I didn't see it, but I heard the spin up of a minigun, and next thing I knew, I was dead. So instead, I tried to move towards the inner parts of Bunker Hill, and now I got to see where everyone was hiding. And I don't blame them, there's a guy with a minigun out there. But that doesn't mean they were happy to see me either. But after looting a submachine gun, there's not really anything they could say about me moving in. With the area now somewhat clear, the bigger picture began to piece itself together. These Alliance volunteers were holding down the fort, but since they're more like me than the Army remnants, when the Army saw this place as a new place to set up shop, there wasn't any way to stop them, but to hole up inside and wait for a chance to flee. And I just happened to stroll through and kill them instead. Jesus, Frost really is a dog-eat-dog world, isn't it? Upon more investigation, I found an Army guy just chilling, so, I had to do it to him. And then when I went to sleep, I found a new terminal that had all sorts of new breadcrumbs to chase. One of which being that some kind of mutant was captured and spoke about a kingdom of Themis based out of Salem. Now, I don't know about you, but if that isn't a nod in the right direction, I don't know what is. The hike to Salem began as any Frost adventure did. I made it about 5 steps down the street and couldn't hit anything with my gun, which meant I became lunch for someone's dog. I found a note while traveling that talked about a feral ghoul infestation at the Boston airport, but it also explained how normal ghouls were trying to cope with their lives from that of the 1950s to now having a target on their backs for being different. But the most crucial part of that note was that it talked about a group of survivors holding up in Vault 81. I'll try to make sure to stop by that later. Further on, I passed by a settlement being attacked by raiders, and after taking them out, I basically had the run of the place. Now, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, but the remaining settlers didn't care that I used their facilities, and would even chat with me to some degree, but no matter what I did, I could not use the workbench because I wasn't allied to them. But with no way to join them, I decided to at least make some food and then head out. I made it out to the Gibson Point Pier, and Salem was only a stone's throw away now. But I started to run into cultists over here. They weren't much different than normal survivors, other than the fact that these guys were pros with throwables. Whether it be Molotovs or toxic bombs, these guys could dome me with an explosive from anywhere. Sometimes I wouldn't even know that they were there until I was already on fire. And the worst part about the toxic Molotovs they used is, yeah, sure, they may not set you on fire and burn you to death, but instead it covered the entire area in a sheet of radiation that kills you from the inside out. I eventually just ended up going a long way around, only to die to a Malden when at Dunwich Borers. And only on the next attempt did I finally make it to Finch Farm and gain a new place to rest. After more mines and another haunting walk later, I arrived at Salem, and while snooping around, I actually got a quest to pop up. I don't know if it's supposed to happen, but I thought this was cool. Normally when you arrive in Salem, there's an NPC named Barney shooting mirelurks, but instead, I was told to observe the mutt crabs, which are basically baby mirelurks, and then find the Themis cultist burglar. What? My first actual quest?
Is nothing. Hey, yes.
carried a key on him that opened up the basement, giving me a new place to sleep, and with that came some new info. The ghoul I had just killed followed someone named Father Daniel, the leader of the Themis cult. He spoke of Daniel's time being short and then explained that people as a whole were luminous beings filled with radiation, and that by letting go, mankind could become one with the holy essence. The plot thickens. At the mention of letting go, I was all on board. Was this the main storyline of Frost that I stumbled upon? Probably not, but I was willing to dive in and see where this rabbit hole led to. This was no easy task, however. A quick look around showed Salem to be full of cultists, and on top of that, even the telephone wires were warning me from charging in. But seeing as there was a big church that they were all hanging around, it basically screamed, "Come this way." But man, were those telephone wires right. I had to methodically clear this place out, but I probably did it in the most goofy way possible. Now, somewhere here I went insane, as if that's a surprise. It's not like hunting down and killing cultists on a whim is an action performed by sane individuals. However, slowly but surely the cultist ranks were being thinned out. But even with the pastor of the cultist on his knees, I still got Molotov'd and sent back to the beginning. But the pastor didn't need help with killing me, no. He was way more than capable of keeping up with his purge by fire brethren. But when it came time for our glorious rematch, all it took was a couple pieces of ordnance and the cult had been dealt with. I began to search through the church and came across an unfinished gospel. It turns out that Daniel was beginning to lose his mind and focus more on vengeance than saving people, and on the second floor, I learned why. Homie must have gotten bullied so much for looking like a giraffe on welfare that he drank the Kool-Aid and turned into a fruit gusher. Those things are delicious, and I'm sad Australia doesn't have them, but more important than reminiscing on a fruit snack, I found a terminal on the roof, because where the fuck else do you put computers in this game? It talked about how Daniel buried a woman named Evelyn under an oak tree where everything began. But I also got my first legendary weapon, Daniel's Vision. A sword that dealt some decent damage as well as dealing radiation damage. Now, in my brain, my smoothest of smoothest brains, the only oak tree that came to mind was all the way in Sanctuary. And being that it was at the beginning of the game, I figured this was the next logical place to go. But as I went to leave, I ran into an old friend of mine. After coming back to life and regaining Daniel's vision, I set off for Sanctuary. I turned on the radio to fill the quiet, and instead of that familiar feeling of exploring, it almost felt nostalgic in a way. Kind of like the first feeling of stepping out of Vault 101 or 111 and taking in the sights. But this was instead a frozen tundra of dread, not some happy-go-lucky wasteland, as odd as that sounds. But I did find some sense of normality. I stumbled across a vendor who didn't try to kill me on sight. He didn't have anything I found useful, but just the fact that he was surviving out here like I was made me happy. It's hard to explain, but it's kind of like that old saying, you don't know what you have till it's gone. I took all the random traveling merchants for granted, and so finding anyone who didn't want me dead almost felt peaceful. But I couldn't stay here. I had to keep going. The walk to Sanctuary was long, but pleasant. Nothing too crazy happened, and when I saw that giant water tower, whew, I knew I had made it home. I found a new bunker behind one of the houses and set up shop. There were some notes from other survivors, but they were long gone before I had arrived. Sanctuary was once again empty, and I was free to search it. Or so I thought. Someone had stayed behind. Now, I don't know who this man is, but FaZe Clan, eat your heart out. The only way I ended up killing him was by throwing a stun grenade to knock him prone and then bum rush him with my sword. After searching the nearby area, I saw Codsworth in the distance, but when I went to use VATS, an unexpected friend appeared. The Vault-Tec rep. This makes sense as he's a ghoul in the base game, but seeing him here was awesome. And the coolest part about all of this, he was a companion. Not only was I beginning to find friendlies in the Commonwealth, I had found an ally. Things were beginning to look up for me, but when I tried to look for a clue as to where to go next, the tree in Sanctuary was most unhelpful, which means that somewhere else in this game there's a tree people refer to as the beginning. So where do we go now? Without having a concrete answer, I decided to go out on a whim. Ever since I had gone insane, my tips during the loading screens had changed into very cryptic messages. One of them being, you will find liberty at sea. And since Libertalia is in the sea, I figured it wouldn't hurt to at least go look. Worst case scenario, I make a long out of the way trip, but best case scenario, I find a new clue. So the Vault-Tec rep and I got to step in. Two homies just trying to make it in this whack place. We made it about halfway and now things got interesting. I gave the Vault-Tec rep a rifle I was carrying and he was pretty much dead accurate, which in Frost is insane. But I still got smacked up like I owed these dogs money. When I wasn't being beat up, we stumbled upon the Hanging Tree. At first I thought this was just a Berserk reference, but then I found the grave of Evelyn, the woman Daniel's note spoke of. However, I couldn't interact with the grave other than read a note that didn't give any info. Maybe I need a shovel. I'll try that later. The Vault-Tec rep and I continued to the coast, but honestly, I was being escorted. There was no other way of saying this. The Vault-Tec rep had beef with everyone, and so if anyone made contact, he whipped out his rolling pin and charged in. And my dumbass would still somehow die during these conflicts. And die I did. I died so much trying to make it to this damn coast that it's unbelievable unless you see the footage. But like all good things, things had to take a turn for the worse. The Vault-Tec rep and I got to fighting cultists, and sadly he was struck down. I went to check homie's pockets, as that's what you do in these situations, and all I found was a note asking about paradoxes. And then the Vault-Tec rep turned into a mannequin and I gained all of his gear. I really had gone off the deep end. Who had I been talking to and traveling with for the last hour and a half? But when I died, the past events were wiped away. What I don't know can't hurt me, right? Getting to the coast seemed impossible. I died so many times that progress, even with another helper, seemed impossible. So now I was wondering if I had a shovel and could dig up Evelyn's grave, maybe that would tell me where to go next? Only problem is, the only shovel I could guarantee in this game was all the way back in Sanctuary. So I made the executive decision to reload a save to grab it and then make the long journey back to the Hanging Tree. On our travels, we came across a heavily guarded area. There was a wall surrounding a neighborhood with turrets taking out feral ghouls. It was referred to as the Compound, but this is Covenant. Oh shit! Oh man, I don't know what the hell this is, but I can't kill it, so it must just be a trick of the light, right? Oh, no, it is very much real. So wait, you're telling me that my mind was so far gone now that my own thoughts were trying to kill me? Damn, Frost has no chill. I came back to the compound and found another manifestation of my inner guilt, a shadow. I couldn't hurt this one either, but thankfully it wasn't hell-bent on killing me and I was able to just leave it behind. The Vault-Tec rep and I eventually made it back to the Hanging Tree, but wouldn't you know it? Shovels can't dig graves. That's okay, I guess. We were close enough to the coast that I could see Libertalia in the distance, and I wasn't going to let some silly little puddle of water keep me from swimming on over. Making it aboard some boats, I tried my best impersonation of Solid Snake, and is it too soon to say that I'm not good at stealth games? But on a second attempt, I found a bed on the beach to plan my assault. I figured the top floor of the submerged ship would be the goal, as that's what it usually is in the base game, but getting there was another story entirely. I'm really starting to get sick of these goddamn landmines. To no one's surprise, my first time ended with me getting rocked. So the next time around, I tried to do the sneaky approach, and it was going well. The Vault Tech rep and I took out some survivors when we swam over to the main ship, but I dosed up on some drugs and began the ascent. We took out some army members, but when I thought everything was gravy, I got slapped in the face by a fucking rocket launcher. I tried to rush some survivors and got blasted. Then I had a heart attack. Alright, raiding the ship is going to be a bit harder than I thought, it seems. But on the very next attempt, I made it to the top of the boat and had to tussle with a power armor user. Except I got too greedy and pushed my luck, allowing this doofus to pull out a gun and waste all of the time I had spent on this. And then I got hit with the biggest oopsie I've ever seen. I missed the fucking mine! Yikes. I'd hate to be that guy right about now. But between you and me, I made a little montage of how insane this boat trip actually was. Alright, this was getting ridiculous. Absolute insanity. This was one of those things where maybe there wasn't anything up there. Maybe this whole area was just a big dumb waste of time and I should try elsewhere. But I couldn't. Don't you see? I nearly had every potential enemy location mapped out. Going back would be even a bigger waste of time than trying to ascend this stupid place. I had to see it through. Something was here. Something I needed. Or was there? Was this entire area a figment of my imagination too? And with taunts coming up saying, I will find Libertaria at sea, appearing more and more frequently, this had to be more than just a coincidence. So I kept trying, because I'm not the problem here. The army just isn't cooperating, right? Yeah, that's it. They just aren't playing along. I gotta find what I don't know exists. But then I had this run. Not only did I make it to the second level finally, but then the screen freaked out like it did with Father Daniel. There was an army guard that I gently moved out of the way, and then I began snooping. I had hit the gold mine. I found terminal passwords, a location on where to go next, and lore. Turns out some smugglers were having ship problems in the open waters and their boat sank, taking some package with it. But before I could formulate an escape plan, the goddamn Vault Tech rep went and tickled some robots' balls that got me shot. And then a fucking landmine took my legs off! The next time I made it up to this room, don't ask me how long it took, please, was wild. For starters, I had sent the Vault Tech rep into what I can only assume was certain death, but besides that, it was almost like everyone wasn't paying attention, or just wasn't there. The army remnant inside was nowhere to be seen, and I still got all the info leading me to the recon base, but I didn't get the terminal password. I even checked all the bodies I could to see if maybe the remnant was among the dead, and no, homie had just vanished from the game. Well, I guess I'll just have to head over to this recon base and see what I can find. But before going, I decided to try out a rocket launcher I found. It was the most inaccurate weapon I had ever seen, but trying to lead my shots and hit a power armor user were fun for a time and a perfect way to leave this shithole on a high note. Now alone, I made the walk to the recon base. I passed by a couple familiar locations, but peeking your head into a small room with a pissed off Protectron never ends well. But when I did make it to the base, it looked like I wasn't the only one searching for answers. Dead army soldiers laid outside in the snow, and inside were cultists tearing the place apart. Dealing with them wasn't anything tough, but when I tried to use a terminal located inside, it required the password that the missing army remnant at Libertalia had. I bet you that lore tells me where to go next. I tried to search around and found a pile of survivors, and then I found another goddamn landmine. Woosah. 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 I decided to try and reload a save to see if I could just brave Libertalia again, but no, my saves had become corrupt. There was no going back. I tried leaving the base again and stumbled upon a survivor's corpse. However, this one carried a confession, tying him to Troy Bishop, the guy that I found on the boat. Okay, maybe I was heading in the right direction. I continued heading in the same general direction all the way to General Atomic's Galleria, a nice small community completely run by robots. And they weren't hostile. Okay, cool. I stopped by the restaurant they had there, got told to take a seat, and then got asked how I wanted to be served. But I paused. Surely I heard that wrong, right? They meant the food, right? No, they actually meant me. I guess to get a decent meal around here, you have to be the meal yourself. So seeing how I didn't have any leads on where to go now, I just started exploring. I ended up at Walden Pond and decided to check out the Raider hideout here, and at first it seemed alright. And then I got reminded of how much damage guns do in this game. But how do you beat guns, I hear no one ask? By throwing a stun grenade and then showing them what a real sword looks like. Now it was time for some loot, and most of it was pretty run-of-the-mill chems and medicines. But then I found Big Jim, an absolute unit of a melee weapon. It immediately did more damage than Daniel's weak-ass vision, and now I could terrorize the Commonwealth with not just a wrench, but a wrench with a nail in it. Now, I messed up the footage a tiny bit here. I was so fixated on Big Jim, I forgot to show some of the places I had visited. But honestly, forget about all of that because my mental state was so far gone at this point, I was making friends with wrenches and fighting the Silver Shroud himself. I was trying to get into Vault 81, but it looks like the vaults are just closed off this time around. And honestly, I can't blame them. Who the hell would let my character in at this point? Later on, I found this crazy looking shrine. There wasn't any lore to find or anything, but it did have a spooky guardian. This goddamn bear nearly made me jump out of my chair, and combine this with the fact that it was raining and dark, I'm not surprised this bear got the better of me. A while later, I made it into the Sunshine Tidings co-op, and normally I wouldn't add this into the story because not much happened here other than reprogramming a robot and killing some ghouls, but this robot is important and a master of teleportation. You'll see what I mean later on this one. And by later, I mean right now. I took a little snooze and this robot teleported all the way from its settlement to my side. I don't know if this is supposed to happen or if this robot was trying to kill me in my sleep, but now I needed to be doubly aware before sleeping in random beds. So by this point, I was super duper lost. But since the last time I followed a loading screen tip worked, I decided to try it again. This time with Parsons Insane Asylum. I had been getting tons of messages to come to Parsons, and since it wasn't like I was following any other leads, I figured it would serve as a distraction at least. But the loading tip failed to mention one very vital piece of information. It left out the part that the asylum was covered in Malden men. And damn did these guys want me dead. I couldn't just fight one of them, no, that would be too easy. No, instead I was fighting every bastard in the tri-state area. And unlike Assassin's Creed, these guys did not fight one at a time because where's the fun in that? After 30 minutes of fighting these jerks, I could finally scope out the area, only to learn that I couldn't even get inside this place without a special key first. Just my luck. Alright, well, the only thing I could do is go back to exploring. Somewhere along the way, I bumped into an iBot that told me about Cambridge Polymer Labs, so off I went in the hopes I could find something useful. Now, I hate to ruin whatever hopes you may have had about this place, but unfortunately, the Polymer Labs were a death trap. I got excited as I walked in through the front door and got attacked right away, but anyone who has done this quest through the railroad ending knows that there's a ton of ghouls and a ton of radiation here. Frost did not change that, and I had nowhere near enough supplies to fight off rads and ghouls at the same time. Then I tried to creep around Cambridge looking for new places to explore. The locals did not care for that one bit, but I consider it as a win, as when I stopped off at the campus diner, I found a survivor praising the jukebox. I left him alone and scrounged up whatever supplies I could find, but as long as I left the survivor alone, he left me alone. He only got mad at me when I turned his jukebox off, but if all the man wanted to do was listen to the oldies while madness set in, who am I to judge? After all, I had made friends with a wrench. Big Jim and I continued our travels, and I must say, traveling by night has its ups and downs. On one hand, you can't see anything some nights, but on the other hand, If there's a giant pillar of smoke and flame, it's a lot easier to see at night than it would be during the day. But as if this place was designed only to test my patience, I stepped on more landmines. Even after I had seen one down the road, I stepped on one to the right of me. It took a couple of attempts to make it through the mines and then not die to the raiders inside, but I seized the fort and gained a new fancy place to sleep. Upon awaking, I started surveying the land, which really meant I was just being chased by ghouls that led to being attacked by survivors, which led into seeing people that don't actually exist, and then trying to wait out a rad storm. 10 out of 10, navigation in Frost is anything but boring. With the rad storm over, I got chased by more ghouls and ended up in Lexington. Now, Lexington is an odd one. The streets are pretty calm if you can avoid the feral ghouls scattered around. There's also plenty of beds to sleep in, and only a couple of places to go inside, and oh my fuck. I found some hoodlums hanging out in the apartments, and then I had one of the scrappiest fights I've had in a while. Once I recovered, I went to check out the Super Duper Mart. But what kind of dummy expects a ghoul-ridden place like this to be any different during Frost? Not me, right? Right? Alright, well, the only other spot to check out was a metro. Now, I don't normally remember a metro being here, but seeing how I didn't remember how many ghouls were in the Super Duper Mart, who am I to say that this hasn't been here the whole time? But I tell you what, this place was ominous. Then a slave burst out of one of the doors. I turned to see a mysterious figure that may have been Kellogg, and then a dog attacked from behind, killing me. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and check this place out. It took a couple of attempts to get my footing, but now being able to fully explore the metro, it was clear that something here was running some sort of slave trade. But I had only found one enemy survivor so far. Where the hell was everyone else? I tried the access tunnels, but I set off a trap. But after trying again, I found a sewer with the words "Let Go" scrawled on a wall. Okay, this has to mean I'm in the right place. I traveled through some drain pipes, and I won't lie, I was spooked. With how dark these places were, anything could be hiding just mere feet in front of me, and I wouldn't be able to tell. However, I pulled through and ended up in a room covered in ghouls. But I didn't die to them. I don't even want to know who put this here. Another go later, and I was already back in the same spot, but this time I ran past the ghouls to an exit that led just outside of the Medford Memorial Hospital. Maybe there's a connection here, but I'll have to check that out later. I went back inside to the ghouls, and using my elite gamer skills, I threw one grenade and cleared out the entire room. But besides drugs, I didn't find any other leads to go off of. This wasn't the only tunnel to explore, however. There was another passage that led to some pretty radioactive parts, and since I had a bed nearby, I figured that there wasn't any harm in dying a couple of times for scientific research. And then I saw the ghouls. I had to effectively dose up on as many anti-radiation chems as I could and make a run for it. Something had to be here, or at least I hope so. I dodged past tons of ghouls in an effort to find something, and at one point even had all the ghouls dead and nothing but silence again as I crept through the shadows in only what I feel like is the backrooms of the Fallout universe. It's a feeling of safety because nothing is trying to kill you, but also that same feeling as you're being watched because something should be trying to kill you. The backrooms threw me for a loop. Fallout 4 seems to have a loading issue sometimes, and upon loading back in, I had to fight through ghouls that normally were not there. I did manage to travel far enough to find more random survivors in metro tunnels, and when they were dealt with, I found a transition door to Concord Station. I fought off survivors trying to defend their home, and then found some lore. It turns out that Lexington was now run by some slaver named Six Nails, but I hadn't run into him yet, so maybe if I went back to Lexington I would find him? So I continued through a sewer, ended up in Concord, and ran back to Lexington to see if my theory was right. And sure enough, inside the metro, more enemies respawned, but in doing so, I got the worst save of the run so far. After bending the laws of space and time to get out of that terrible spawn point, I found a note saying that the slavers were terrified of something in the lower levels. But was it just the ghouls, or was it something else? After making it out of the metro, I decided to do a quick sweep of Lexington but couldn't find anything. But Corvega was nearby and seemed to have tons of movement. So I'm not sure if Corvega is considered to be a part of Lexington, but seeing how I was out of leads again, I guess I'll give it a once over. Instead of just charging in though, I tried to scope out the place, and here is where I finally got to see the negatives of insanity. I thought leading my shots back at Libertalia with that rocket launcher was because of the rocket's weird trajectory, but it turns out my character was so frazzled from all of the heinous acts I had committed that merely looking at a gun caused my character to shake more than jelly on a plate. I mean, look at this. How the hell am I supposed to hit anything with this, let alone see what I have to deal with? I was able to use my rifle to take out one of the door guards, and once inside I had another phase through the door to try to kill me. Surely this won't be an issue for later. However, if you're still watching up to this point, you probably know how areas with tons of people go by now. This was only the first half. Surely there had to be something here. Further in, I found a Protectron that I could hack, and I usually use this guy for my restricted kill challenges, so I know he can do some damage. But apparently this RoboCop wants to operate differently in Frost. Get too close to him, dead. Loot something off a body that it killed, dead. Just be in the vicinity, dead. The Protectron was doing work, but man, this was a painful process. This combined with the absolute garbage of even getting to this point was enough to make my head spin. It took a while. We're talking like over an hour, but eventually I had this run where everything that could explode did, and I was able to dose up on enough chems to outspeed death, and managed to turn off the turrets and finally sleep. Nearby was a terminal that belonged to Six Nails himself, and I got to snooping. Turns out that he and his gang of raiders strolled into town and took out all leadership. Then they took any survivors and made them into slaves, setting them down into the metro to salvage scrap. But something down in the metros made everyone uneasy, and now people were actively avoiding the place. Besides the ghouls I found down there, I didn't see anything else that could have been that big of an issue, so I decided to clear out the rest of Corvega to see if I could find any more clues. And I'm gonna speed this next part up. I cleaned out the entirety of Corvega, but I didn't find anything to write about. I had become accustomed to taking jet and turning homies into mincemeat that running into combat wasn't as intimidating as it was before, but since I didn't find anything useful, I went back into the metro again to see if I had missed something, and even with more ghouls spawning in, the place seemed exactly the same as last time I was here. But this gave me an idea. If new enemies had spawned in since I left, maybe that gunner back at Libertalia would have respawned by now. So I began the long journey across the Commonwealth once again. On the way back, I started checking out some more areas, one being the Revere satellite array. This is where I learned that ghouls were actually a lot easier to deal with if you used your head. If they charged at you, all you had to do was block, and usually the follow-up attack would be enough to kill them. With this knowledge, I cleaned out this entire place, and I'm glad I did. Besides ammo and a couple of chems, I found a ghoul mask. This thing works just like it did in Fallout 3 by making it harder for feral ghouls to notice you. The only downside is that it gives constant radiation, so I won't be using it. If more masks like this existed in Frost, who knew what else I could find? But almost immediately as soon as I left, I got jumped for my mask and sent back to my last save. I made it back to Libertalia, and surprisingly no new hostiles had shown up, but when I went into the captain's bunk, my screen freaked out and that army remnant had returned. to which he blew my arm off. On a second attempt though, I smacked the life out of him and got my passcode for that recon base. But as I tried to leave, the screen kept freaking out? Was there something else here? No, it was just some stupid shadow man hiding in the corner trying to make my eyeballs commit die. Leaving Libertalia and making it to the recon base, I got that terminal to work and learned a ton of new things. Turns out that same smuggler group I had been reading about had a falling out when Troy, who was now dead back on Libertalia, tried to make some secret deals to get more money. And I learned that apparently they were transporting some type of biological weapon. But I got a name drop of the next location, being a surveillance site. Only problem is that it was in the middle of the glowing sea. So I decided to explore a bit on the way. There's no rush here. And before too long I found a radio tower. Now, I don't know if this works the same in the base game because I've never used it, but in Frost this is one of the coolest things ever. Basically you just turn the tower on and it picks up new radio signals. But these could be distress calls or they could be warnings about locations. So I went to track one down and I came across a bunker hidden in the ground with a man wearing bear clothes nearby. I couldn't take any risks, so I had to put him down, but everything he was wearing was legendary. I feel bad for you, bear guy, but if you're gonna try to outdrip me, just know that your drip is now forfeit. I checked out the bunker, but I was too late. The distress signal had been on repeat and the denizens were long gone. Moving on, I ran past the Memorial Medford Hospital. I was gonna check this place out ages ago and now seemed like a good time to do so. I fought through some Maldamen on the outside and the inside was pretty unguarded. Or at least that's what I thought. I crept around for a decent while until some madman came running around the corner and killed me with a flare gun of all things. But trying to get back into the hospital seemed impossible now. Enemies were appearing from everywhere. With the little amount of supplies I had, I figured I'd have to leave it for now and come back later. I traveled for a while just checking out the scenery when I came across two people standing on the coast. One of them kept referring to the other as doctor and was thanking them for healing them. My initial mindset was that if I could get some chems off of them, I'd be able to heal up a bit as my radiation was getting out of hand. But when I approached them, I found something better than a fight. An actual doctor. Not only was I able to talk to both of these people, but I was able to cure my radiation and heal my missing health. This was the first actual doctor I had found all game, and the fact that they were just random people out in the world meant I could have either missed or killed some of the other doctors. This is wild because normally when I saw other people, I automatically assumed they wanted to kill me, and that's why most of the survivors brandish their weapons and tell me to back off. It's because they fear the same thing. This is genius. If I want to get help from people, I have to get close, but at the risk of misreading the situation and dying. Frost is dope, man. Continuing on from the doctor, I arrived at the Coast Guard pier. There were a couple feral ghouls running around, but nothing I couldn't handle. I found a terminal requiring a password and a journal. This journal was from Major Arthur Gannon, the same name that was on the terminal found at the recon base. The journal talked about finding the location of the FMS Columbia, a ship that the smugglers were using before it sank to the bottom of the sea. So, it was in the Commonwealth somewhere? The journal didn't say, but I can guarantee you that the password required for this terminal might tell me. So, I guess that means it's time to go brave the glowing sea. I dosed up on enough chems to kill a small medieval village and got to running. I was able to dodge all of the creatures here, but with no health to spare, I made it to the abandoned shack and descended into the surveillance site. And to my surprise, the Enclave were here accompanied by robots. I tried to creep around in the shadows, but I didn't have high hopes for this endeavor as my health was entirely irradiated. But a robot blasted me before I died to rad poisoning. Now, I won't lie to you, I didn't have enough supplies to make that trek across the glowing sea and survive. There just wasn't any way, so I doubled back and decided to go revisit the spot where it all began. Good Neighbor. I ran into a couple of tunnel dwellers that didn't seem to know who I was, so I had to give it to them. But not before they gave it to me. Over and over. Little did they know I would come back, and they wouldn't. Now in Good Neighbor, I got to cracking. With my own skills, these poor bastards never stood a chance, and this gave me tons of loot.
tons of food, and some lore from a terminal that would have pointed me to the Libertalia if I hadn't gone insane. I found some chems in the bottom of Hotel Rexford, but nothing compares to the amount of jet I found at the old State House. I walked in and immediately huffed that good cow excrement and got to work smacking the guards. Then I turned the room into a conga line of death as more survivors poured in. This place was loaded with stuff. It's no surprise Hancock likes to hang out at this spot. I got out of here with such an abundance of chems I was actually having trouble carrying it all. Before leaving, I decided to check out some of the other warehouse openings. It wasn't the prettiest assault, but I did manage to take out all the survivors inside and nabbed an electrified Chinese officer sword. This thing was leagues better than Big Jim. It's been fun traveling with you, buddy, but the times, they are a-changin'. But the next warehouse was rough. The survivors inside must have learned that guns were my weakness and let me know they were not playing around. But after clearing this warehouse, I figured the next best thing to do would be grab a hazmat suit from the mass fusion building up the street. Only issue is, besides dying to get in, once I did make it in, I still needed the key card to get it, and that just wasn't gonna happen. Guess I'll just have to tough out the glowing sea. Since I was in the area, I decided to check out Hallucinogen before heading back. Inside were a bunch of Malden men fighting each other, but while I was searching for loot, I got shanked from behind. So next I checked out the combat zone, and after introducing myself to the guards, I strolled into a very upset beehive of Alliance members. Maybe they were friends of the guards or something. With enough exploring, I tried to head back to the Coast Guard Pier, but navigating around downtown Boston seemed to be a lot harder than it normally was. After gaining some distance, I made it out into the open wilds and witnessed a survivor being chased by dogs. He didn't seem hostile, so I took care of the dogs to see if maybe this guy had loot, and to my surprise, he thanked me and handed me cash instead. So not only does Frost have unmarked doctors, it has unmarked side quests like this. I don't remember this being a thing in the base game, so once again, Frost is dope as hell. After that, I made it back to the Coast Guard Pier and planned my next run into Chicago, but I got sidetracked by that weird shrine again, and just like last time, got killed by its guardian bear. On another attempt, I tried going the long way around, and I don't think I've ever seen things this bad. I was wondering about the absence of death claws, and I ended up finding tons of them along the border of the map. I managed to wait it out and sneak around, but my heart was thumping the entire time. Getting closer to the surveillance site, I managed to get inside with a lot more health to play with, but I ended up dying trying to be Neo from the Matrix when I was actually acting like more of a Mr. Anderson. I decided to grab a bed closer to the glowing sea and got rewarded by a dude in his underwear limping around the place telling me that if I worked, then I'd be able to eat. What a gem. Now, with a closer start, I did the usual dose up on chems and run like mad, to which I made it to the surveillance site with no health to speak of. But instead of the Enclave being here, the place was empty. I made it to the bottom floor and began exploring, only for my chems to wear off and have my character die of a heart attack. Okay, if only I could make it without using all of my chems and not have the Enclave spawn, I'd be set. That is, unless a deer had other plans for me. On my next attempt, I managed to make it inside with more health to play with, and luckily the Enclave were still nowhere to be found. I made it back to the bottom floor and found a working suit of power armor and a holotape to teach me how to use it. But the true treasure of all was the Coast Guard terminal password. Excellent. Turns out that I had done things out of order, but at least I knew where to go next. But I wasn't sure about getting out of the glowing sea with the supplies I had, so I borrowed the power armor and took to the surface. The rad resist on this thing would make the glowing sea a cakewalk, except I forgot that in order for you to have the rad resistance, your power armor needs to be fully fucking complete. In one of my brightest moments ever, I overlooked this crucial detail and so happily walked into the glowing sea until I realized what I had done. I was halfway to the pier and my health was completely irradiated again. I was on borrowed time and the power armor was so slow that I ditched it in an effort to move faster. I was taking jet to hopefully buy enough time to get me to the terminal because I only had mere seconds left. I managed to get inside of the terminal and learned that not only did the FMS Columbia sink, which no fucking duh, but it was only off the coast of Spectacle Island. I checked to make sure my data wasn't corrupted and then tried to sleep, knowing full well I'd wake up dead. But my character knows all, and now I didn't have to waste all my resources getting into the glowing sea. The journey could continue. The journey wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I made it all the way to the castle, but seeing how the Alliance had taken it over, I didn't think fighting all of them was gonna work out. So instead I popped some chems and made the long swim to Spectacle Island. Getting over wasn't so bad, but as a reward I found a boat. But this wasn't just for show. It was a fast travel system. As long as I had fuel, I could fast travel to coastal spots. This would have helped me save some materials on the swim, but at least I had a safe way back now. Moving on, I cleared out the island and then swam to some boats offshore. All I found were dead army remnants, but something tells me this isn't what I was looking for. And seeing that there was a location marker just a tiny bit further made me realize that what I was looking for was actually underwater. Who would have guessed that a shipwreck, which usually means a boat was damaged in some way, was not able to stay afloat? Wow! So I swam down, and besides the discount Spirit Halloween decorations, I found a backdoor key and some news clippings. They talked about a Dr. Lerna and referred to the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, the CIT for short. Alright, new location to go explore. Some other lore I found kept referring to train lines and different circuits, and considering how much stuff goes down in the metro, I would not be surprised if I needed to visit them again. One final piece of information I found was that Dr. Lerna was into human trafficking. Apparently that bioweapon the smugglers were transporting was a human, and when Troy Bishop caught on to that, he tried to blackmail Lerna for more money, and this caused an unrest in the smuggling group, which ended with the group falling apart, not to mention the ship being sunk. So now the trip to the CIT ruins could commence. I mainly stuck to the shadows unless I had to flex on some poor random guards guarding a bridge. Now inside the CIT, I didn't really find anything useful here until I got to the roof. There was a survivor wearing some Corsair gear and you know your boy needed that drip. She had a key to the sewers underneath the CIT, but I decided to head back in to finish checking out the building first. Besides ghouls, I didn't really find anything else here, so maybe I wasn't supposed to be here? Well, all the lore I found on the FMS Columbia talked about a train line, and since it mentioned the CIT, maybe it was just whatever train line was closest? I checked the map and Kenmore Station seemed like the closest train line that I hadn't explored yet, so that's where I decided to head next. Getting to Kenmore Station was a lot harder than it sounded though. By this point my radiation had practically overtaken my entire health bar, and even though it was a short walk over, the constant radiation storms made getting there a pain in the ass. Just imagine you're walking down the street and then Todd Howard in his infinite wisdom decides to hit you with immediate cancer because you looked at the sun wrong. That's essentially what I was dealing with. Now inside the station I had to deal with some ghouls, and with my asthmatic kung fu, I was able to dispatch them and gain a new place to sleep. Continuing to explore, I found this very welcoming path into the sewers, and as I descended, it became increasingly darker with only my lantern and very small lights to guide my way. I stumbled upon some Maldamen mid-ceremony and was promptly told to piss off. Okay, so I'm not going that way, I guess. I explored the area and found a door leading to a subway line. Subways are basically giant-ass tunnels, so maybe this is the right way? But as I walked in, I bumped into survivors that would rather give me the UK welcome instead of conversing with me. But these guys seem a lot easier to deal with than the Malden men, so let's try this again. I took them out and found what looked to be a hole in the ground, so naturally I jumped in. Except all it was another entrance into the sewers. But by going this route, I found some lore telling me that the Malden men were actually just a bunch of people that got trapped underground and turned to cannibalism to survive. And when they were freed, they spread their beliefs above ground. So the reason they attack so viciously is because they just smoked a fatty and need a quick snack. It all kind of makes sense when you think about it. They're all just stone cannibal closet goths with a Warhammer 40k armor fetish. Moving on, I stumbled upon a giant area filled with water and a door that clearly wanted me to try to get to it. I mean, look at the thing, it's got a big ass light and everything. Heading in, I got hit with the biggest plot twist ever. I didn't have any keys to the doors inside. Who designed these? I checked around and saw a door leading to the Old North Church, but the ghouls living there didn't like newcomers. Alright, before moving forward, since every place ended in death, I decided to reload a save and backtrack to check out the sewers underneath the CIT ruins, since I had the key and all. But this place was filled with tons of radiation, and even using heaps of jet to get the most out of the run, I couldn't make it far enough without dying to rads or just getting blasted. So that means I went back into the metros again. As I was walking around, I found this hidden alley, and when I went to investigate, there was an out-of-place door, and it just so happened to require the backdoor key. Alright, now we're getting somewhere. I opened a huge vault door, followed a hatch to the lower level of the CIT, and came across a dead Dr. Lerna and a smiley hood. I had seen these things all over the place as I played, so I wonder what they mean. But as I checked the dead man's pockets, I found a note saying Lerna couldn't let go and that I needed to meet someone named Janice at Parsons. Interesting. I found a diary of Janice at the beginning of the game, so maybe he was the one leaving these smiley hoods? I checked a nearby terminal to see if I could find anything else to help me, and boy did I find some sauce. I found terminal logs that went over all the bioweapons Lerna had been working on, and one of these being the HRD-3 was being tested on to see if it could regenerate limbs, but homie couldn't channel his inner lizard, so now he was just a cripple for life. Then I read about HRD-4, and this one was weird. Basically, it was given tons of implants to make it live longer, but at the cost of seeing hallucinations, suffering from amnesia, and mania. Which is strange because that's all the stuff I've witnessed this entire run. Are we something akin to this experiment? But then I read about HRD5, and this one apparently had the same treatment as D4, but it had gone insane and was sent to Parsons. I have a feeling I'm gonna run into this thing there. Parsons sounds like it's going to be wild. I backpedaled through the metro and began the journey to Parsons, and other than getting mauled to death by a couple of dogs, it was a pretty cruisy walk. But when I got inside, I saw that I may have been over my head. Inside the main lobby were a dead Malden man, a Themis cultist, and an Alliance volunteer, and each of them carried a note that spoke about being lured here by a voice and how the bottom level of the asylum beckoned them to come. I just realized how fucking stupid that sounds. I started opening doors and got greeted by some Malden men, but I can't get over this stupid fucking joke. Oh my god. Sorry. I started opening doors and got greeted by some Malden men, but by now I was well versed in the art of block and smack tactics. I combed through the asylum and took my time taking out whatever adversary stood in the way. Through this, I gained a ton of radaway and chems to fight radiation. Things were beginning to look up, and at one point I had the whole place cleared. But there's another section that I needed to get to, and it was just behind this water fountain. Holy shit, enough with the fucking landmines already! On my next attempt, I managed to defuse the landmine, and making it further in, had to fight a Maldemen welcoming party. But this is where things started getting weird. I found a hallway leading down into the dark and ended in what looked like solitary confinement cells. I checked each cell and came across some more lore, but this time it was name-dropping Lorenzo Cabat, and made it sound like a fellow scientist was being experimented on with the forced evolution virus. And then something happened that made the entire staff flee, and whoever was writing this entry log stayed behind to let the experiment go. So where is it? Further in, I came across the mysterious serum and the Parson Master Key, and then some lore saying that the answers I seeked were within these very walls, and that the answer was to let go. But let go of what? The next room seemed a lot more open than what I had come to expect, and then I arrived in a lab of sorts, looking towards a security cell housing... Is that Lorenzo Cabat? What the hell is going on here? I couldn't seem to communicate with him, and the only terminal in the room was broken and unable to be interacted with. In the back of the room there was an elevator that took me back up to Parsons, and now I was confused. Did I miss something? I ran around for about 20 minutes double checking everything I could see, but nothing seemed to jump out at me. So I tried to leave, and that's when the master key was used, dropping me into a welcome note scrawled on the wall, and another saying I look nice today. Well, at least the game has some manners, I'll give it that. I walked through double doors and ended up in some kind of labyrinth. With nothing but the darkness to be seen, I walked around trying to keep track of where I was going, but upon hitting dead ends and then taking wrong turns, I was lost as hell. Eventually, I ended up at some stop signs, and from there it was only a couple of turns before I found more. And then I found a door. I arrived in a small room with a key to let go, and a note saying that the ray of sunshine was right this way. I walked down the hallway surrounded by more solitary cells, but each of these had a smiling mask wearer inside. They didn't say anything, but just stared at me as I walked by. The words "let go" were written on the wall behind them. A door was illuminated at the end of the hallway leading back to the Commonwealth, but upon opening it, I arrived back in the labyrinth again. And after walking around, I found myself in the same strange let go hallway. So I tried something that sounds dumb on paper, but hear me out. The last note I read said that the ray of sunshine was right this way. So what if I only went right? I kept going right. I kept getting transition screens, and after so many, I ended up in this strange twisting corridor that led to a dead end with lights hanging over it. And interacting with it transported me to a room with a ship door. Did going right actually work? I tried the door and it was labeled memories. I went through and was back on the FMS Columbia, at the beginning of things. A terminal told me that this memory belonged to those who were smuggled across the sea, and pressing on led me to the very beginning of the playthrough. It referred to me and the dead body I awoke next to. It said we were searching for each other. I continued to a Maldamen shrine, and then was told that someone was never the main threat, just adapting to survival. But then I saw the next room, marked the ending of things. It was an institute facility that seemed to be experimenting on humans. I watched for a while and saw the entire lifespan of one of these experiments. Then I read a terminal saying that things come and things go, and I needed to let go. And then my entire inventory got cleaned out before my eyes? I was now naked and afraid inside a room with "let go" written all over the wall, with only one way out leading to Sunshine Tidings. I found a hunter and quickly stole his fit, and then found a survivor wearing the same laughing mask. Only this time, I could interact with him. He didn't speak to me, but I got the option to ask, "Why did you save me?" To which I was handed Janice's manifesto. It turns out he was trying to free something he referred to as the snake. He just wanted it to have a fresh start, and seeing how I was able to ask about being saved, I take it that not only were there similarities before HR, D4, and I, but we were actually the same thing. I was the one being smuggled across the sea. This whole time I had been chasing my own tail and just trying to figure out what had transpired to me before actually coming to. I didn't remember anything due to the amnesia caused by the experiments, and the weird things I saw were just other side effects of the experiments. Cause let's be honest, I didn't kill all of those people. It was all in my head. Big Jim wasn't a wrench. He was probably a dude I used to hang out with or something. It all makes sense now. But with only one way out of here, I climbed a ladder and ended up in Far Harbor, a haunting area full of fog and quiet. Well, I guess it's time to make a name for myself and let go of the past. Let's see what this place has to offer. You've got to be fucking kidding me. And that's where we're gonna leave it. Frost is one of those mods that I think everyone should check out for themselves. After finishing it, I went and tried to find some more info on things I may have missed, and man, there's a shitload of hidden things that I did not find. Meaning, even after watching this video, there's still plenty left to explore with fresh eyes. This was our 20,000 subscriber special, and as always, the biggest thanks goes out to each and every one of you. What started as a goofy hobby while I was unemployed has turned into something that allows me to share wacky videos with you so you can laugh at my struggles, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here's to our next milestone of 50,000 subscribers, and as always, I've been Chris from Crisis Gaming, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you guys.